My brother stole my inheritance and blamed our father. I found out my brother had been forging my father's signature for 3 years when the funeral director handed me an invoice for $89,000. The number didn't make sense. Dad's prepaid funeral plan should have covered everything. I stood there in the mortuary office, my wife Natalie beside me, staring at line items for upgrades nobody authorized. Premium casket instead of the modest oak one. Dad selected in 2019. Upgraded flowers, extended visitation hours, a video tribute package that cost more than my first car. The funeral director shifted uncomfortably behind his desk. A tall man named Douglas, gray temples, kind eyes. He said he was sorry for the confusion, but the original plan had been canceled 8 months ago. Someone called claiming to be me, requested all these changes, insisted they'd pay the difference. Douglas pulled up the account notes on his computer, turned the screen toward me. The phone number listed matched my cell phone. The email address used my name, but with a domain I'd never seen before. The signature on the authorization form looked exactly like mine, down to the way I looped the J in my first name. My hands went cold, holding that invoice. Natalie put her hand on my shoulder, asked Douglas who actually made these changes. He checked his records again, said all the calls came from a number he'd assumed was mine, but now looking at it more carefully, he noticed the area code was different. He wrote it down on a sticky note, slid it across the desk. I recognized the number immediately. It belonged to my brother Liam. I'd been managing Dad's affairs since Mom died 6 years earlier. Liam lived 4 states away in Arizona, claimed he was too busy with his contracting business to help. Dad and I had a standing Sunday morning breakfast routine. Same diner. We'd talk about everything. Politics, his garden, my daughter's soccer games. He seemed sharp as ever until the Alzheimer's diagnosis came in early 2020, right before the pandemic locked everything down. The decline happened faster than any of us expected. By 2021, Dad needed help managing medications and bills. By 2022, he'd moved into my guest room. Couldn't live alone safely anymore. Liam visited twice during those 3 years, both times staying less than 24 hours before inventing some emergency back home. Dad would ask about him every few days, wondering why his younger son never called. I made excuses, didn't want to tell my dying father that Liam had essentially abandoned him. Dad died on a Monday morning in January, me and Natalie by his side. He'd been in hospice care at our house for the final 2 weeks, mostly unconscious, but occasionally having moments of clarity where he'd recognize us, try to speak. That last morning, he opened his eyes, looked right at me with perfect focus, said my name, Jonathan, clear as day. Then he said something that didn't make sense at the time. He said, check everything, don't let him fool you. His eyes closed. He was gone less than a minute later. I thought he was confused, talking about some memory from his past. Dementia patients often say strange things at the end. I called Liam from the hospice nurse's phone. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice groggy. I told him Dad was gone. He was quiet for several seconds, then said he'd try to make it out, but he couldn't promise anything. Work obligations. He showed up Thursday night, driving instead of flying, said it was cheaper. He looked different than I remembered from his last visit 18 months earlier. Thinner, deep circles under his eyes, nervous energy. We sat in my kitchen that night after Natalie had gone to bed. He asked about Dad's final days. I told him about the hospice care, the moments of clarity, the last words Dad said. Liam got very still when I mentioned Dad's final statement about checking everything, not letting someone fool me. He asked what I thought Dad meant. I said I assumed it was dementia talking, just confused thoughts at the end. Liam nodded, changed the subject to the funeral arrangements, wanted to know what I'd planned, how much everything would cost. I explained about Dad's prepaid plan, how it covered all the basics. Liam seemed relieved, almost too relieved. The funeral was small but meaningful, about 30 people from Dad's church and neighborhood. Liam left immediately after the reception, claiming he needed to get back for a job. The meeting with Douglas happened 3 days later, when I went to close out the funeral expenses. That's when everything started unraveling, standing in his office with that $89,000 invoice. I asked Douglas to print out every interaction on Dad's account for the past year. He gave me a thick stack of papers, showing 11 phone calls, 7 emails, 4 in-person visits to modify the funeral plan. Every single contact was logged as coming from me, but I'd never made any of those calls, never sent any of those emails. The in-person visits included a physical description. The notes said the client was about 6 feet tall, with dark hair and a beard, wearing casual business clothes. That described Liam perfectly. It didn't describe me at all. I'm 5'9", sandy blonde hair, never grown a beard in my life. I showed these descriptions to Douglas, asked if he remembered meeting with this person. He thought hard, said he'd handled 2 of those appointments personally. When I showed Douglas a photo of Liam from my phone, his face went pale, and that's when I realized what my father had been trying to warn me about. Full story is linked below or on my channel.